If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Hello listeners, and welcome to this week's episode of The Cult Vault. I'm your speaker Casey, and would you believe I have another 2 new patrons to give a special and warm welcome to. Hello to Jess and Rachel, newest members of the group. Thank you so much for choosing my small platform to support, to help me in releasing weekly content for free, whilst enjoying the exclusive episodes. I hope that you like going back and listening through them all. I have added you both to the sponsorship section of my website. Now this week we are talking about something new. It's a group known as OneTaste. Here is Ruwan to talk us through his time spent within this female pleasure-focused community. So hello Ruwan, and thank you for agreeing to chat with me today. We finally have the chance to sit down and have this conversation after many attempts over the last year or so. And I'm really looking forward to listening to more of your stories. So would you like to start by introducing yourself to the listeners?
Sure. My name's Ruwan Pagala. I do various things, but I work in personal development, and I got my start in personal development with an organization called OneTaste that was also a cult. And it was a formative experience for me in my mid-20s. And lots of good, lots of not so great, but it was a big part of my life, I would say.
And you're currently in a different part of the world to the one you were born in?
Yeah, I'm from New York. I live in Thailand for now with my partner. We're having a baby, but moving to Europe soon. So I won't be in Thailand too much longer.
Oh, such great news about having the baby on the way. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
So you mentioned just before that you were a member of OneTaste. Can you give the listeners a brief overview of what the group is, how it was founded, how long it's been around for?
Yeah, I don't know actually if they're functioning anymore with the recent media that's come out on them, but when I found them, it was in 2007. I didn't actually start interacting with them until 2012. They were a health and wellness company, or are, that taught about sexuality, really focused on female sexuality. And I actually found out about the group because the founder had a TEDx women's talk with orgasm in the title. I was a 19-year-old guy, so of course I clicked and I watched it. And it really touched me. I watched a lot of TED Talks in college, and this one, obviously I clicked on it because of the sexual theme, but then I listened to it and it really it was speaking about connection and intimacy, never used the word spiritual, but kind of had the spiritual feeling. I was kind of moving into that direction with my thoughts. And, I was a young man and maybe whatever revolutionary wanted to the world type of thing, also kind of lost and kind of confused about what my life should be, but also life. So when I did finally find them, when I moved to New York City, they had just set up their New York branch because they're based in San Francisco. In 2012, they were in Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Body, which gave them a huge media boost, a huge boost to their exposure. So I believe in that same year is when they opened up OneTaste London, OneTaste New York, OneTaste LA, some other small cities in the United States, some other places in Europe. They had small communities as well. And I went there thinking I was going to learn something about dating or sexuality, maybe something spiritual. But the event I went to, it was September 2012, was really just about talking about feelings. I mean, at least that was how I interpreted it. And I had no idea what this had to do with sexuality or anything they did. But I just found myself super moved. And over the course of the next few months, I basically left my entire old life to enter this new seeming utopia.
Wow. So kind of young, ambitious, looking for something a bit different,
Hmm.
open to trying out different things and saw a video that was kind of in line with those directions that your thoughts seem to be moving in at that time.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is not unique to me, but I definitely, as I was entering real adult life, I was like, there's got to be more to life. Kind of on a spiritual level, but also like, you know, Occupy Wall Street was a little bit before this time for me, but I was just kind of inspired. Like there must be a better way that people can organize, right? Like this way that, especially living in New York, working a job that barely paid enough to live. Like it's like this. There's no way that this is the way like humans are supposed to be. Me being a science nerd, I was reading a lot of books about like anthropological books about humans organized, where like there were more matriarchal systems where people were a little bit more connected, not so consumers. Anyway, like these kinds of ideas that a lot of young people have.
Mm-hmm.
And One Taste really represented this. Like here was a community that really championed, what we might call feminine values like connection and emotional vulnerability, non-competition, seemingly egalitarianism. Like it really seemed like utopia. And of course, there was a sexual element. There was a huge validation of feelings, which I didn't really feel I mean, I actually felt I was lacking in my life without really realizing it. Like most of the, most of the social situations I was in, you didn't really get to talk about your real self, which is true for most people in most big cities, right? And like here was a group that really wanted to know about everything about me, and it was really eye opening and enlightening, and I don't use the word healing a lot, but it was healing for me at the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And do you feel like perhaps the college or university experience between a lot of typical students might leave them kind of open to looking for deeper connections with other people, as opposed to kind of the nightlife kind of almost one night stand situation that a lot of people find themselves in when they first start going to college?
Probably, I think there's that kind of disconnected socialization, but also like how workplaces work. I mean, most corporate environments, I think is just the norm, especially unless you live in a small town where you're friends with everybody. In most cities, I think I mean, it's just the norm. You don't know your neighbors. You're kind of in competition in some level with everyone, especially if you're a young person. Maybe this is more true for men. I'm not sure, but you're kind like everyone's kind of like a little bit your competitor. You're a little bit your rival. And in this world, like at least on the surface, everyone's your friend. Like everyone, like there's a lot of camaraderie and yeah, and it just felt really good to have people really care about what I actually thought about. Like a level, basically I experienced a level of social authenticity that I hadn't before, which is, I know
Mm-hmm.
it's ironic, and coming from a cult where like you are ultimately getting brainwashed, but like I got to have real connections in a way that I didn't even know was possible before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And was this movement started by one particular person, the lady who did the TED talk?
Yeah, so her name is Nicole Daydon. Yeah, I mean she's been in this kind of sexual personal development world for a very long time. I don't know exactly her story, but from bits and pieces, I mean she was very brilliant, and she was involved in other things like that.
Mm-hmm. And when you got involved with this group, you attend a workshop or a session, and then
Hmm.
you kind of get that love bombing aspect and feel like, wow, this is great. I can feel like there's some real connections here, so I'll keep going back.
Yeah, so their intro event is called Turn On. It's I mean it is a sales event. It's you go there, they play three communication games. Actually, I don't know exactly if this lineage is exactly correct, but I know that their turn on event was influenced by another group called Morehouse, which has been often referred to as a cult, and Welcome Consensus and Scientology and Est Landmark was all kind of mixed in. Like the
Okay.
founders of these organizations allegedly were all friends, which is why some of the
Right.
same terminology is used in all of the groups. Like One Taste kind of, I think, moved away from this, but like for a while they were using kind of Scientology terms, just
Mm-hmm.
because they got it from someone else who got it from L. Ron Hubbard, etc. Um, so this event was, and eventually, as I entered the organization, we learned the workings behind each game. but they're seemingly just icebreaker games. They seem like a game, like things you could play at at a company retreat, but they're specifically designed to get people to feel comfortable opening up. And again, that in itself is great. It's like it was very healing in many ways, like especially in New York City, especially as a young man. I didn't typically do this, but yeah, I mean, eventually it started, like it became my favorite part of the week, where I couldn't wait to like really be vulnerable with this group of people. And you just get such a high from being seen and known and really vulnerable, as we know. And then the last game is kind of designed to give you insights in a way that makes you want to do more with them. I mean, it's all very structured. I mean, on the surface, it looks like just like a game, but like underneath it all, like we were taught different ways. When I worked for them, we were taught different ways to communicate, to get people to want to do more stuff with us, basically.
Okay, interesting. So who runs the workshops? You just said that you went on to work for the organization. So when you first attended these sessions, the people that were running the workshops that you attended, how had they reached that position?
Well, the turn on events is run by different staff members. It's usually whoever's the most senior person in that city. Because there is, it seemed very egalitarian, but like there was a very structured hierarchy as well.
Okay.
So when I had first interacted with them, they hadn't really set up their New York branch yet. So it was kind of like lower ranking people running the events. But eventually when they set up New York, it was the head of New York, one of their top people. And yeah, I mean, the way you end up working for them is you start as a student. Like they only hire people. I mean, later on they changed this, but at the time they only hired people who were students first. So everyone who works for them is indoctrinated first as a student. They basically pick the most dedicated, intelligent, and motivated students of theirs to work for them. So like they're basically using their student body to farm people who could recruit more students, essentially. And the deeper I got, the more access I got, and the more candid conversations we had in front of me. And basically they would identify like, oh, this person is good looking, they can attract this kind of person, this person's articulate, they can attract this kind of person, this woman's impressionable, we can get her to repeat a script to this other group. Like it was very specific.
Okay. And the way the workshops were run, the content was written by Nicole, who ran the organization overall.
Well, I mean, the intro events had a specific, it was just 3 games. So like there wasn't really content, but it was like how the games are run. The game, this intro event, Turn On, sold their intro workshop, which was $100, which was the actual how to do the orgasmic meditation practice, which I didn't actually mention. It's their whole thing was focused around a clitoris stroking practice called orgasmic meditation, where a man strokes a woman's clitoris for 15 minutes for the purpose of sensitizing both him and her. And that you learned on a full day Saturday workshop after you had gone to these turn on events.
Right. I was going to say, so it doesn't happen at the initial turn on event.
No.
Yeah, I think you would have to kind of have that icebreaker introduction before kind of being introduced to something, because for a lot of people that would be quite an outlandish proposition.
Yeah. So like, there's like a whole funnel, basically. Like you go to this turn on event, you learn about it, you get to have this like vulnerable experience. If you're intrigued, they sell you the how to Om class, the orgasmic meditation class. You go to that. In that class, that was so to answer your earlier question, they didn't have a lot of content. A lot of their teaching was done kind of by impromptu interaction, like what we would, all right. So for context, everything in the OneTaste world was turned into an analogy for the stroking practice, Om. So like everything was an Om. They would actually say everything is an Om. So like what a teacher would do in the beginning of this full day class was stroke the room in quotes, right? Which was basically, let me see if I could like explain this in like a minute. In orgasmic meditation, the goal of the stroker is to really empathize with the woman, like really tune into her, feel what she wants, and then touch her with the exact speed, pressure, location on her body that. So like, it is a real skill. Like, it's a useful thing. It's great for lovers. It's great for whatever. They took this idea of like how you communicate is you feel where someone's at, and then you say the exact thing that'll make them feel the most in their body, which is also a very useful skill, a legitimate skill. And that's basically in all of their classes, no matter what the content advertised was, like whether this was like sexual class or a social class or a relationship class, the first half of every class was the teacher just doing this, like just saying, like almost like in many ways, it was from a public speaking standpoint, it was really amazing to watch trained OneTaste speakers speak, because they just be off the cuff giving advice to people, saying poetic lines. Like if they recognized someone was having a bad time, they would get in there with them and like do this impromptu therapy. And we were trained to do this, which is a really cool skill. And it was also a way that people would, of course, become indoctrinated into this way of living, because, it is unusual. It is different. And if someone like Nicole or one of their head teachers can really read what you're feeling, which is basically what they taught us to do all the time. Like they basically learned how to weaponize empathy, essentially. If someone can really feel what you're feeling and then tell you something that you didn't even know about yourself, of course you would kind of become attached to them. And just to continue with my story, which is also, I went through the entire sales funnel. So I went to Turn On Events. They were cool. I went to the How to Own class. Back then, Nicole still taught those classes. So she would stroke the room for the first 3 or 4 hours. And she said some things to me, which no one had ever said to me before. Like she really empathized with me and understood my situation just by looking at me, just by feeling me. It was like seemingly magical. And so, of course, what she said to me in retrospect wasn't particularly profound, but just to have been understood so much kind of made me sold on the whole OneTaste thing. I was like, there's something cool here. It's amazing. And then, completely independent for their sexual practice, I was kind of just into what they were doing. But then in the middle of the day, that's where you actually see the live demonstration of OM. So Nicole would stroke a woman in front of everyone on a table. Obviously that's like a peak experience. It's a very unusual experience for most people, as you said.
Yeah.
And then the latter half of the day is actually how to do the practice, which wasn't that, as exciting, but that's basically what the class was.
Right. So in terms of sexual expression and sexual freedom, I feel as if maybe this is not true because I'm living in this moment now, but I feel as if those things are becoming more acceptable in society to discuss and talk about, depending on probably where you are in the world and the people that you're surrounded by. So this experience that you've had with Nicole and the demonstration with, I'm guessing, a member of OneTaste.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So that 30 years ago would be like absolutely unheard of, probably, or very much kept to some anonymous or secret location somewhere where they would never openly demonstrate and practice this type of female arousal with an audience. So of course, to go to a demonstration where that is happening, you're like, wow, this is like really progressive. And why is it taboo? Why isn't everybody experimenting this way or trying to express themselves in this way? Is that kind of how it felt?
Yeah, basically. Because as I became more and more into it, I really did think we kind of jokingly spoke about New World Order, but like I really felt like, okay, like these people, they figured it out. Like imagine the entire world was like free sexually, but also just like emotionally, and like we were all like connected. Like that was the whole thing. Like we like their kind of spiritual world domination goal was to get everyone connected, which I think a lot of cults, a lot of personal development groups and spiritual groups have the same idea. Like, let's all believe in the same God. Let's all love each other, which is beautiful. Yeah.
But I feel like the sexual proponent of this group does make it different to the majority of religious groups, religious splinter groups, and various sects of different spiritual groups, and that in places like San Francisco, New York City, London, Los Angeles, like these trendsetter cities where the like countercultures throughout history can kind of be looked into, like underground movements and music and riots and this kind of like bohemian behavior almost that you can see in various different points in history in these large cities is exactly where all these new OneTaste groups started popping up, which I think is really, really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, is that kind of person, right? The kind of person that would have gotten into the punk movement in the 80s was also into, like, there's a lot of artists in this community, a lot of like seeker type, people who are willing to do something a little weird, which is also part of the fun. Like everyone was like really interesting. Not everyone, but like it's a really interesting group of people. And like the community itself would recruit. It was a self-recruiting group because anyway, it was it was just very magical for me entering initially.
And you attended you said the sales funnel. So you went through the funnel in the New York branch of OneTaste.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so you have this initial introduction, then the workshop with the demonstration, and then the afternoon is where you said you spent time learning the techniques used in the demonstration.
Yeah, and then at the end of the class is the actual lab portions. Like you get to partner. I mean, you're supposed to ask someone to, do the practice with someone you just met. You do the practice in the class with an instructor. It's kind of like a yoga class, but with clitoris stroking.
Okay, and they put that at the very end. I to kind of encourage you to come back to the next session, which then costs maybe a bit more than that workshop.
Well, they at the time they had some like slightly more expensive classes. Like that was the OM class, so they had OM 2. Those classes weren't that popular. Their next big thing was the coaching program, which is a year-long immersive training. That cost $15,000. So it was a big jump from $100 to $15,000. They would pitch that, but in between you were part of this community. So like once you took the How to Own class, in the big cities, twice a week at least, there was a free OM circle. So it was a free class, a free community event for anyone who had taken the class, where you get to like basically almost like a salsa hangout where you get to meet up with people and dance. It's like you get to meet up with people and do the OM practice. And it was just like, it was a very safe place for people to explore this part of their sexuality.
And how were like emotions and feelings managed? Because I imagine that there must be some relationships formed within these groups does that kind of aid in the practice, or does it hinder the practice in terms of everybody being involved with each other to bolster the experiences that everybody is having?
That's a good question, because at the time, polyamory was very, it was very encouraged. Like everyone was supposed to follow their desire. A lot of people, I mean, there's a lot of young people, but there's a lot of divorcees or like people entering as a relationship, and a lot of them would open up, and like that kind of drama. Of course, drama occurs when everyone's connecting, sleeping with each other. That kind of drama, I think, increased attachment to OneTaste, because who's going to mediate the drama, or who you're going to go to if your partner is sleeping with someone else and they're pissing you off, and they're also and you're sleeping with someone. Like OneTaste was the authority on. I mean, they taught relationship classes. They had this staff of relationship coaches. And they really did give. And I mean, I coach relationships now, and most of my education I got at OneTaste. Like I think it's a legitimate education. They used it for alternative means. They got people like dependent on them, but yeah, I mean, they got people dependent by giving them good advice as well. Like everyone became like attached to OneTaste because they had all the answers basically. Yeah, I think that answers your question.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's kind of I asked that question with the subtext of kind of the totalitarian approach that you mentioned, where you have like spiritual groups like Jehovah's Witnesses, where you dependent on them to answer everything for you on how, you know, how best to raise your child, on what clothes you should wear, how you should have your hair, what kind of job you should work in, what you should, you should go for further education. And that comes through familiarity with your spirituality and scripture and kind of commitment to your church throughout your life. So with high demand religious groups, they have spent so much of their life kind of having this rule book or guidebook to get them closer to their chosen God, that they almost don't know how to, well, members of all these different spiritual groups find it difficult to make those independent decisions because they've never had that level of independence. And I feel like OneTaste is kind of sounding as if it does something similar, but it's using sexuality, sexual expression, emotions. So it's doing the same thing, but it's just using a different part of the kind of the brain and the makeup of kind of the human body, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, with both jealousy but also arousal, like they were introducing people into basically new territory with their sexuality or relationships, which of course made everyone a little bit, I mean, just willing to seek guidance. I know a lot of people, like people who like you would never think would join a group like this, right? Like they're so successful or maybe very left brain, like a lot of Silicon Valley types, like it's like why would this guy? He's so smart. Very often those guys really became addicted to OneTaste because of a relationship issue, like the love of their life went and slept with someone else, and like who are they going to seek but Nicole for like help? So like this happened a lot.
And when you say that there are types of people that get involved that you wouldn't necessarily immediately assume would be the type of person to get involved, do you think these are the types of people that found it easy to pay $15,000 for a 1-year course?
Well, there's two types of people in that regard in OneTaste. There were wealthy people who, I don't want to say desperate, but like it was worth it for them. Like maybe it's like Silicon Valley types, like guys who had a lot of money or really high paying job, but their relationships were abysmal or their sex life was abysmal. Or really well, like older people who were just independently wealthy, divorcees, stuff like that. And then there were the young bohemian types who typically were broke, but they were passionate. They were willing to put everything on credit cards, like myself, or, you know, they were basically willing to throw caution to the wind. And very often, OneTaste would pair these people up in some way. So like a trope you would see very often would be like a young manic pixie, you know, free spirited young woman with a nerdy, wealthy tech guy. Like you'd always see this together, and very often she'd be kind of introducing him to a new level of sexuality because maybe this guy had never really been with a beautiful woman who was sexually free, and then he would pay for all her OneTaste courses. And this was kind of like this was like a super common type of relationship you saw in OneTaste all the time.
Right. Okay. That is interesting as well. It's almost like that sense of like fulfillment or enlightenment that people search for in spiritual groups, but they're looking for it in a sexual sense with OneTaste. And I keep comparing it to spirituality, but that's because the majority of interviews that I've done have been with people that have left religious groups. So that's the bulk of my experience. So I'm trying to kind of compare the two, which is, it's really interesting actually to draw the parallels. So you mentioned that you could do the $15,000 course, and then you said something about credit cards. So I'm guessing that you went on to do the $15,000 course.
Yeah. I remember I told the woman who she was like Nicole's second in command. She was the head of New York. She ended up being my mentor for a while. And honestly, really influential person in my life in a positive way. But I told her flat out, like, hey, I'm interested in this coaching program. I don't have that kind of money, blah, blah, blah. She's like, don't worry, just have a chat with me. Right. Everything was kind of like casual, right? And it was another one of these experiences where I felt really understood, really seen. I almost cried during the conversation. And then when I basically, I got to the point, I had this feeling in my chest of like, this might change everything in my life in like the best way possible. And all it is a little bit of credit card debt. I should just do it. Like, it was like, and honestly, that I'm glad I did it ultimately, but like, it was like, it was a decision that I would not have rationally made earlier. And yeah, so I mean, I was part of that group of, more irrational younger people that yeah, couldn't actually afford $15,000, but found a way to do it.
And a lot of the time in these groups, people who make decisions that they feel like they made them independently, but were actually very strategically guided into making that decision. Do you feel like that is potentially what happened with you?
Yeah, I mean, for weeks I was going to for months I was going to their intro events. Then I took their how to own class. And then for weeks I was going to own circles and intro events. And I really felt my life was changing. And it was. I was becoming more confident. I was feeling more expressive. And honestly, for at that point in my life, the thing that was stressing me out all the time was my anxiety and lack of confidence and stuff. And to me, that was worth tens of thousands of dollars. So if I wasn't in a low confidence state, would I have spent that money? Probably not. But yeah, I don't know. That's what happened.
So with the workshops, you mentioned that there would be these OM circles twice a week that were free of charge. But then was it always around like clitoris stimulation, or was there actual intercourse happening in these workshops as well?
No, it was just that. And actually I think this is what OneTaste did well compared to their precursors. Like this clitoris stroking thing, they didn't make it up. It was actually created by a guy named Vic Barranco in the 60s, who had another alleged cult wellness organization that still exists called Morehouse. But they would have the woman get completely naked. The process would be like many hours long. Like, it wasn't very marketable. It was really kind of out there. OneTaste made it 15 minutes. Women only take off their pants. You only touch the clitoris. Like, it kind of made it more, it was just an easier thing to say yes to for a random person, for a typical person. So yeah, we only did this practice. And the idea was like, just like Bikram yoga or like Ashtanga, anything you do over and over again, like it's like you learn more by doing the same thing over and over again. So that was just what everyone did.
I wonder if it works in the same sense of meditation, and when people repeat verses over and over again, and in some groups people are encouraged to do this when they feel themselves maybe interacting with worldly people more often than their congregation thinks that they should, or if they are having impure thoughts before marriage about somebody that kind of maybe attends their group or their church. And so a lot of the time people are told to go and meditate or read scripture or repeat verses over and over again. And it almost takes away that element of critical thinking and independent thought by, as you said, kind of doing something that is repetitive. So I wonder if this worked in the same sense.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, it seems like every group has an ongoing practice. Like
Hmm.
Scientology had auditing. Yeah, we had Om. Yeah, I mean, every religion has some form of repetitive prayer. And I think, you do, I mean, just like sitting zazen or doing yoga, like you do get something out of doing that. You get to go deeper each time. Like that's the language. You get to go deeper. You get to
Yeah,
learn more
yeah.
about yourself. Yeah, and I think there's something legitimate to that. But to your point, also, it is a way. It is like a way that you stop thinking outside of the box.
Absolutely, especially when you people are saying, okay, we do this ABC, and you follow these steps, and don't deviate from the steps. This is exactly how
Mm-hmm.
things are done, and then again, there's no need for you to question anything or make any decisions because all of that information is already provided for you. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, was there ever the
Yeah.
opportunity for you to move in with a group?
Yeah.
Did you ever kind of live together, or was it
That
always
was the
just
next that was the next stage.
right?
Actually, I want to say
Okay.
one thing about what you just said a second ago. Uh, One thing that was different, I think, about OneTaste was that even though they had all these rules and like these structures and protocols, like just like every group does, because they represented like the quote unquote like dark feminine or like the dark side of spirituality, they kind of encourage rule breaking in a way that was very fun. Like they had like kind of
Okay.
like the I think the only other group I've seen that does this was like the Church of Satan, that like
Okay.
kind of not encourage you to break rules, but you weren't punished if you broke certain rules. Like you were kind of
Mhm.
like, anyway, yeah, I think this is just something unique. And I think this is like only a sexual, I do think a feminine run organization would have something like that. I think men in charge would be a little bit too stuck up. And these are my theories. I don't know if this is true. Um, yeah, anyway, but to the next thing, yeah. So the next piece after I signed up for the coaching program was moving into their house. In every major city, in San Francisco, they had a 60-person group
Oh,
home.
okay.
In New York, it was they got two apartments, two 3-bedroom apartments in a penthouse in Harlem, but they packed in at its maximum 24 people. So there's a lot of people sharing not that much space. But the idea, it was kind of like an ashram, like you are in close quarters with people. Every
Mm-hmm.
morning at 7 a.m. we wake up and do our practices together. It's a conscious environment. And everyone was there to grow, basically.
And when you go and stay in one of these houses, do you have to kind of pay to live there?
You pay rent. It was
Mhm.
actually very inexpensive. I was paying $490 a month, which in New York was crazy cheap. But I was sharing a bedroom with 4 people initially. We paid an extra $350 a month, which covered our breakfast and dinners. So it was actually kind of a good deal for $840 a month. You had your food, most of your food and your room paid for. Um, but actually in their language, you didn't pay rent, you paid for a game admission. Like living in the house was like a game for you to learn from, which was true. It was kind of like it was like kind of like being in a reality show slash ashram. Like there's always something dramatic and interesting happening. Obviously there's a lot of sexual things going on. Yeah, and it was actually, yeah, it was unusual unusual and fun.
Okay, so when you move into this house, are these with participants who you've already met and become acquainted with in the twice weekly
Mhm.
sessions?
Some of it, but actually, most of the so there was staff that lived there, the OneTaste New York staff, but there was also, because the coaching program took place in New York, it was one weekend a month for 10 months in New York. A lot of people from around the world moved into this residence to basically be in New York. I mean, the people who didn't have jobs. And for me, it was easier to move there because I already lived in New York. But yeah, it was there was every month it seemed like someone new was moving in or moving out, so there was like a lot of revolving there. But yeah, it was always full. There's always a lot of people.
And was there an element of relationships, sexual relationships inside the house that formed, and people maybe looking for monogamy at any point under one roof?
Well, not monogamy. Monogamy, funny enough, by the time I was leaving 2 years later, monogamy became a new edgy thing to do because polyamory became so normalized that if you were monogamous, you were really like an edgy
Right.
thrill
Okay.
seeker.
Interesting.
But at the time, in 2013, when I was really like moving into the house, you're kind of seen as I don't want to say you're ashamed for wanting to be monogamous, but you're kind of seen as like a normie or someone who didn't really want to grow or be
Immerse yourself
challenged.
fully into
Yeah.
the group. Right. Okay.
And so everyone shared a bed with a member of the opposite sex, and OneTaste decided who your bedmate was. And they would say, like, we're pairing you with your energetic opposite. That was like their, like they would say they would pair up fire people with water people, or like yin yang type things.
Okay.
So yeah, it was usually male female. Sometimes two women would share a bed just because there's more women than men most of the time. Yeah, and the idea that they advertised was that it's there for you to learn about yourself, be challenged by living with someone, basically. But part of it was probably just to create more drama, but also it would save on rent. So I think it was all those reasons.
And when you said that OneTaste would pair people, how long would the pairings last for? Was there kind of like an end date, or was it naturally like people would gravitate to other people, or was there a point where the people in charge of the pairings would say, okay, Ruan, now you're going to be paired with this person and no longer paired with this person?
It was a lot of this was done on the fly. For my first year in OneTaste, I was paired with the same person the entire time, but like every so often they would just mix things up. And actually, one of the most fun parts of living in this house was the weekly house meetings. Like the weekly house meetings was kind of like going to church with your best friends. It kind of reminded me of being like Cub Scouts when I was a kid. Like you'd all get together, you'd share everything cool with going around in your life, but also the house mom would give impromptu coaching and like spark up drama and then resolve the drama. Like it was a really interesting time. Every Thursday night we would have this, and like this is where they would change people's lives around, or have people move rooms, or have someone do something unusual for their enlightenment. Like it was always something interesting going on, basically.
Wow, that sounds like very, very busy. Like not necessarily at the time in a negative way, but there's no sense of feeling sort of like settled or like establishing a routine that is going to just continue, like your 9-to-5 job kind of thing.
Right. Or time to think, like, and it was done in a way that like it wasn't like a stressful kind of, initially it wasn't stressful. It was like, there's always something so interesting happening. And actually in the OneTaste philosophy, this is something Nicole would always say, like she would compare it to like more traditional spiritual paths, where they would say like, I'm trying to remember exactly what she would say, like meditation or right-handed paths would have you be still. It's kind of like a glass of water. You want the sediment to sink to the bottom. But she would say, oh, but then you can't drink the water. So what we do is we stir everything up so it's all crazy so it could get out, and then you can drink the water. Like that was like kind of her philosophy, or their philosophy of like, let's make our lives as chaotic as possible, and somehow that gets you enlightenment.
That is that is such an interesting approach. But it was obviously working for some people because they were expanding and people were moving into the house. So something must have been working for members at that time. And
she didn't invent this idea. Like it is certain tantra traditions have the same philosophy, like play with sex and drugs and go crazy and see where your enlightenment takes you, your consciousness takes you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And did you ever spend time with Nicole personally? Was the New York branch something that she was involved in actively?
She had her own bedroom there, but Nicole would kind of keep herself separate from people. Like you didn't get to you didn't get to have casual interaction with Nicole. Like, and I think that's how she maintained guru status. Like, you only typically saw her when she was on stage. When she was in New York, we were not supposed to go to the staff apartment. And it's like, we're not supposed to like have casual conversation with her, basically. So like, yeah, she was kind of elevated to like kind of a deity status that way.
And you said a little bit about how it's kind of that there isn't supposed to really be any type of hierarchy, or that's often how it's advertised or spoken about. But then Nicole has a second in command, and she herself is at this elevated status. So when did you start to realize that maybe there were different levels within the group that people could reach?
When I started becoming interested in working for them, this is maybe the spring of 2013. So I had, been around OneTaste for maybe 9 months. I had been in the house for maybe 3 or 4 months. Excuse me. There's definitely, what was different about OneTaste, like to compare it to Scientology, for instance, that had like clear ranking systems. There weren't really clear rankings in OneTaste, but there was kind of like this pyramid of approval, like your status in OneTaste depended on how much the next matriarch approved of you. Like, it was kind of like, anyway, and the way that the chain of command, if you will, was in OneTaste, it was kind of like a series of parent-child relationships. Like, Nicole was everyone's grandma.
Right.
The heads of the cities were kind of parents, and then we were kind of kids, and there were older siblings and younger siblings. And and like when I eventually started working for OneTaste, my mentor would sometimes jokingly refer to me as her kid. And we kind of had this kind of weird mother-son relationship in a way, like where she was my boss, but she would be very involved in my personal life. And I don't know how to put it other than it felt like a parental relationship. And that's basically how the power pyramid of OneTaste worked.
Okay. And did you find that more so when you did start to work for them?
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel that maybe you got to parent level at some point?
So yeah, eventually, I became very elevated in the OneTaste community because my mother figure and Nicole kind of spoke highly of me.
Okay.
Like I was moved up. When I got hired, this was maybe 6 months into the coaching program. In every major city, they hired a handful of people. It was like maybe the top 4 or 5 typically young, articulate people in all the cities. So London had a group, New York had a group, San Francisco, LA. And we were tasked with selling their newest program, was called Mastery. It was a $6,000 6-month course specifically on sexual skills. And I worked for them for a few months. There's stuff I can share about that, but eventually I started my own house in the Ohm community in Brooklyn, across the water. And there I became a parent. It's like I almost started like my own mini OneTaste over there. And the way I look at it, I was kind of like we were kind of like a vassal state to our Lord in New York. Like, we were kind of independent, but we were under their umbrella essentially. And it was very strange because as a 24, 25-year-old guy, there would be people who were in their 60s coming to me for kind of spiritual advice. And like, this was just normal. This was normal in the OneTaste world because I was a very high ranking person in the OneTaste community. So like, of course they would seek, and it was, looking back, it's just like so bizarre, I think now. But yeah. So I did eventually experience some level of parent status.
Do you feel like when you reach that level and you are seen in such a way and you are approached to give out this advice, that it gives you sort of like a higher sense of self-worth? Yeah, I didn't want to say like an inflated sense of self-worth. But is that kind of is that what happens when you reach those levels?
Well, I'll say yes to both, actually. Like, it greatly increased my confidence. And actually, even though I say jokingly, like, oh, these older people, sought my advice, like it's ultimately what I ended up doing for a living after OneTaste. Like, this is what I do now. And I got that confidence and I developed that skills and I believed in myself because of this elevated status in OneTaste. And at the same time, I definitely had an inflated ego. Like, I definitely, I mean, I was just eating up their validation and I saw myself as more important at times or more wise than I actually was.
Okay. So you are toying with the idea of working for OneTaste. You start to work for them and you have this experience before branching off to Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah,
so talk us through what employment looks like.
I worked for them for 3 months, I think. At first, it was another level of utopia because like my first couple months in the OneTaste house, it was all about kind of selfish exploration, like sexual exploration, but also philosophical exploration, spiritual, and a lot of like kind of gluttony of like let me do whatever I want for the first time in my life. I was like really like Pleasure Island. But then after a while that gets old, right? You kind of get bored and everyone wants to find some sort of meaning or purpose or way to give back. And that's where this next stage of like working for OneTaste became that next like type of utopia where like not only am I having fun and free, but also I'm doing like a really important service for the world. I'm teaching people to connect sexually and spiritually and whatnot. And my first, the first month, and I'm doing it with my best friends because these people had become my best friends at the time.
Yeah.
So my first month was incredible. Like we were working easily 100 hours a week. We would get up at 7, do the practices, work till midnight sometimes, laughing and joking and doing sexual things throughout the day. Like it was very much like play. And we're not sleeping. Like we were just like high on fun basically. And it was fine. We did all eventually burn out, of course. And at some point I realized that we hadn't gotten paid because it was never clear on how we were supposed to get paid. Like I was told one thing when they hired me, we were told another thing when they kind of briefed all of us, we were told another thing another day. And after like 2 months, I realized we never received $1. So I maybe because I was in debt or whatever, like I was the one to complain and I kind of got ridiculed for complaining for not getting paid. And they did eventually pay us something, but the response I initially got was, "Oh, I mean, they kind of framed it as like, "Oh, you're being selfish. You're attached to money.
Yeah.
Like you're not doing this for the love of helping people, right?"
Oh my goodness.
So even though I held my ground somewhat, but I also kind of was like, "Wait, everyone I know, including the 4 other people who also weren't getting paid, were all against me somehow, like for this brief period of time." I was like, Am I the crazy? Are they right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like if everyone you're talking to is saying the same thing, you're like, maybe I am selfish. Maybe I'm being an asshole. And anyway, they did eventually pay us something. And I'm kind of glad that, I'm kind of glad I'm somewhat attached to money because I held my ground a little, eventually on this thing. I did get fired, partly because I was raising a stink, but also because OneTaste really did live by their philosophies in that they didn't plan for stuff. They always followed their feelings. So they hired a bunch of people when money was coming in, and then they basically overspent and ran out of money. So they had to fire a bunch of people worldwide all at once. And obviously I was going to get fired because I was a more difficult employee. And from then on, this was the end of 2013. I still wanted to live this lifestyle and be a part of this community, but I didn't want to work for OneTaste. That's what made me start the Brooklyn house. I was like, I want to like create utopia that's not attached to OneTaste business practices.
Okay. So your idea of this utopian community had started to shift in between that you started to work for OneTaste and you finishing working for OneTaste.
Yeah, because they had, when it came to money, they had a lot of weird things going on, like not paying employees. And something that was common was that like they would kind of mix sexuality and flirtation with sales in a way that like it was, it kind of just didn't feel right. Like something about it felt wrong.
Do you mean sort of like you explained earlier, sending out these beautiful women who were practicing free sex and relationships to go and approach wealthier people who may never have experienced the being with beautiful free women?
Yeah, but it's like it's something that's I think been hard to get across was I don't think it ever happened where a woman was like, hey, there's this guy with money, go get his money. Like it was never like that. It was like maybe kind of suggested, or like a person would get a sense like, oh, like I'll get approval from the higher ups if I flirt with this person. And the funny thing is, a lot of these relationships were real. It wasn't like these women were manipulating men.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them actually fell in love with these guys, but OneTaste was the beneficiary. And they had a way of getting people to fall in love. And even like on a smaller level, very often my mentor would have me with women right before she had a sales call with them, so they'd be all turned on and basically say yes to whatever she said. Like there's kind of like this
oh yeah, that's dodgy.
Yeah. And actually a lot of times their sales pitch was right after doing the own practice, so everyone was like basically flushed in the face with orgasm, feeling great about the world. So of course they're going to say yes to the thing that's pitched to them, right? Like when you're aroused, you don't have fear so much, or think rationally. Yeah, I was gonna say one more thing, but I forgot it. But anyway. Oh, and like a lot of women didn't even have to sleep with guys to get them to spend money. Like a lot of them, it was just like flirtation, or they had this called hooking. It was one of the many communication terms. I don't know if they made it up or it's from Scientology or whatever, but it was basically this idea of getting someone to fall in love with you with some sort of expectation and wanting to give you money, essentially, like what a hooker does. Yeah, and a lot of people did that in OneTaste.
Do you feel like there was ever a moment where you had fallen in love with a member or two that you were involved with?
I had quite a few intimate relationships. I did have an ongoing relationship where I did really feel I was in love with, I did fall in love with someone who, for as long as we were together, spent quite a lot of money at OneTaste. She was a slightly older woman. And this is something I can't really explain, but it seemed like somehow my mentor was controlling my feelings, and in a way that I can't really speak to specifically, but it seemed like she put us together essentially.
Right. Okay. And when you talked previously about the OneTaste being self-recruiting, is that kind of you spreading the word of mouth, or do you go out and you speak to people to bring them into the initial workshops? How does that work with the self-recruitment?
Well, everyone who worked for OneTaste or was deeply involved was encouraged to spread the word. But I think also just like they did make people particularly expressive and confident and lively. And very often people found OneTaste because they met a OneTaster on Tinder or something. And it was like, they were like the most joyful, interesting sexual person they had met. So of course they checked out the Om thing. Like basically every woman I got dated in this period who wasn't already in OneTaste, I told about OneTaste, and many of them did go to a OneTaste class because I was excited about it. So like, that happened a lot.
And earlier you said that there were only certain rules there were certain rules that you weren't punished for. It was almost like seen as a fun thing to break certain rules. Were there any rules that were in place that was not supposed to be broken, and there would be any type of consequence if there was?
Everything was kind of contextual, because I'm trying to think like, well, certain I'd have to think about moment to moment. I'm not sure. Everything was kind of contextual. I don't know if there was anything that would always be punished, other than like one thing, which I think was a good rule. Like anyone who gets physically violent would get kicked out of the community, which is not a bad rule. but I remember, like, so there's one incident I can recall where a guy got really jealous because his girlfriend was sleeping with someone else, and something happened like that, some jealousy situation, and he got so mad that he punched the guy, and OneTaste kicked him out of the community.
Mm-hmm.
And I found it kind of strange that they were so quick to ostracize him over this when they kind of let everything else fly, in a sense. Like, they let, like, yeah, I just found like it was like kind of an odd line to me that they would make this the line in the sand. But I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
that's just what they did.
Yeah, I suppose as well, in that situation, there could be an opportunity to sit down and talk about why that's happened instead of immediately just kicking him out and not having that discussion, if that makes sense. Kind of talking through emotions and reactions and all that
That's
stuff.
what I thought, because they were so encouraging of all your dark emotions and validating your shameful feelings. Like, I thought they would validate, like, anger in that situation.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But it might have just been it was a liability, or it might have been it might have been kind of like the feminine culture, like, that violence wasn't okay. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So you stop working for OneTaste, you go over to Brooklyn, you find like a big apartment or a big house and decide to start your own branch of OneTaste, basically.
Well, our own house. We were trying to separate ourselves from OneTaste with being a
Okay.
community, but we followed everything that OneTaste communities did. Like, we had 2 people to a bedroom. We did the own practice every morning. We had house meetings every Sunday night. Like, everyone was kind of involved in each other's lives in a fun way. And again, it was like another kind of utopia for a few months, where, like, so many times in OneTaste, I was like, man, I really found the perfect way to live. Like, I had this thought like so many times, and then it wasn't true in a few months later. But yeah, it was a really fun, peer led group for a while.
Okay. And the house, was it made up of people that had come with you from the New York house, or did you go and find new participants to come join you in Brooklyn?
There were a couple of people that came over, not the OneTaste staff, of course. They had their own house, but yeah, there's a lot of fringe, like, people who weren't super deep into OneTaste because maybe they didn't trust the organization, but they wanted to be more involved in the own community. So yeah, it was pretty easy to recruit people. Like, we always had a waiting list to get people in the house.
Okay. And was there ever any animosity or tension between Brooklyn and New York, or were you kind of left alone?
Well, we weren't left alone, and this is my interpretation. Because we were kind of like a big piece of the OneTaste community, and they were having these, at this point, they had the next coaching program in New York again. So people, and in 2014, this was, OneTaste has gotten really big. They were in many major, they're featured in many major media outlets. They had like OneTaste London had grown a lot, so they were sending a lot of people over from the UK, and our house would host people. So, like, we kind of became a big piece of the New York OneTaste community. And I think because of this, OneTaste was like, oh, this Brooklyn house could be a liability. So they tried to kind of like, like, assimilate us back into OneTaste New York. So the OneTaste New York staff would visit us. We would all watch Game of Thrones together on Sundays. Like, it was kind of like our cousins from Manhattan coming to visit us over in Brooklyn. And that also felt great, because I was like, oh, okay, I get to, like, be a part of OneTaste without the negatives I don't like about OneTaste. And for a while that was okay. But basically they did ultimately take over our house and take over everyone there.
Okay, so just talk us through that, what actually happened there.
Yeah, so I mentioned the idea of hooking earlier. OneTaste basically employed hooking on a mass level. So, like, OneTaste was always just like many companies seeking growth, but kind of in a almost fantastical way. But OneTaste had this idea to, instead of making a new course, because they would always have more expensive courses. So, like, there's a coaching program, and then mastery. In 2014, they unveiled the Nicole Daedone intensive, which was 2 weeks with Nicole, that cost between $20,000 and $40,000.
Wow.
But then they had the idea to sell the major cities, the ones they started in 2013, New York, San Francisco, LA, London, um, sell them to wealthy members of the Ohm community for seven figures. So they basically jumped another degree of 10. So one of my friends actually was independently wealthy, and they were trying to get him to buy the New York affiliate for a few $1,000,000.
Right.
And the funny thing was, like, well, one, all of the cities were not showing a lot of revenue. Like, it didn't make sense financially, but they would keep asking him for more and more money. And when you bought into the OneTaste affiliate, unlike like if you buy a franchise from some other company, you run it on your own and you send them some money every month.
Yeah.
Something like that. With a OneTaste affiliate, you pay them a lot of money and then you worked for them. Like, you kind of became their slave. Like, it was it was like it was framed as if you're getting the opportunity to work directly with Nicole and OneTaste, but you're basically paying a ton of money to work nonstop for OneTaste. So It's kind of a ridiculous thing. So my friend, he was the only person I knew directly who was being offered this deal. He said no to it a bunch of times. So the way that they ultimately got him was that he entered OneTaste with a girlfriend. They were having a very dramatic relationship. OneTaste got them to get married, and then basically stole her away from him and like brainwashed her, got her to do all of these things, like really traumatizing things, sleep with different people, do all this stuff that was traumatizing to her, but also obviously shattering to him, as a way to get him to put his money in. And I remember seeing him.
Oh gosh.
This was while I was leaving OneTaste, so I was spending less and less time. But last time I spoke to him, he had said, "I'm definitely not doing this OneTaste affiliate thing. It's ridiculous." A few weeks later, I saw him again, and he had done it, and I was like, what? Like, why did you put in? He put in like $250,000 or something. I was like, why did you do this? And he was like, he said something along the lines of, "I know it's crazy, but OneTaste has my wife, so I need her back." So that he did that. And then the worst part of it all is, once they got his money, they basically kicked her out and got him to marry someone else in OneTaste. So like, she was totally used to get his money. Obviously he was used for his money, and they discarded her as soon as as soon as all of this happened.
So here you have the kind of dark, rotting side of the green grass when it comes to exploring sexuality and emotions and polygamy or polyamory, and then exploiting those same things. So I suppose that I was hoping that you would just say that you kind of realized that there were some maybe coercive tactics being used in the group, and that's why you decided to leave. But it sounds as if there was trauma and abuse being inflicted on members towards the later end of your involvement, or as you decided to move away from the community entirely.
Yeah, I mean, what happened to her is probably the worst that I directly heard of while I was there. Yeah, I mean, it was a shame, because like I mean, I know, I think it's true for a lot of people who have been in cults, but like,
A quick word from one of our sponsors. How to See a Man About a Dog by Samuel Knox combines darkly comic short stories, powerful poems, and pulp fiction prose to create a heartbreaking and hilarious journey that readers will not soon forget. This instant cult classic by breakout surrealist author Samuel Knox searches for light in the darkest corners of modern life. Read How to See a Man About a Dog collected writings for a surreal, horrifying, and ultimately illuminating experience. Ebook available on Kindle and Kindle Unlimited. Print copies are available on Amazon, Alibris, and more. Get your copy of How to See a Man About a Dog by Samuel Knox today.
you really are sold on the mission and like the good stuff, and you want to hold on to that because maybe you've like
Absolutely.
invested a lot.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, you don't want to believe that this stuff is happening, because you did gain so much. I'll speak for myself. I gained so much. Like I really didn't want to believe this was happening, but this was kind of this is what ultimately got me to leave.
Mm-hmm. And when you mentioned before that there was some potentially untoward things happening with the money in OneTaste, how much do you think was going to Nicole from these programs and courses that people were paying for?
I don't know exactly how things worked, but I know that at one point in OneTaste, she didn't receive any income from OneTaste, but she got to use all of OneTaste stuff. It's like for tax purposes, her income was zero, but like she had an apartment in every major city. She had cars paid for her, all of her flight. I mean, she basically had unlimited funds, even though she had no money technically.
Right. Okay. So how did you decide to move away from all of this entirely, and kind of away from the Brooklyn house and get to kind of where you are today?
Yeah. So in this year, the second year where I was running the Brooklyn house, I had become more and more influential in the greater Rome community. Like people knew me in different cities. I wrote for their blog and stuff. I was on their YouTube channel. So I think because of all these things, OneTaste really wanted me to work for them again. And I kept saying no. But then I thought like there is something I want to do with OneTaste, and that is write a book with Nicole. So I reached out to Nicole directly to write a book with her. I originally offered to write her autobiography or ghostwrite her autobiography or help her with her autobiography, basically. And she said yes. And however, as I mentioned before, like you're not supposed to have direct access to Nicole unless you pay for it in some way, either committing your life to OneTaste or paying a lot of money. So this is my interpretation, at least, like I was kind of skipping the line in a sense, which wasn't cool in OneTaste. So like around this time that Nicole was being really friendly to me, I was getting a lot of pressure from OneTaste staff to commit my life to them. And I kept saying no. I was finally developing a backbone after all this time and saying no to them. I signed up for my very last OneTaste course. It was something called Magic School, where Nicole had often mentioned that she did a bunch of occult stuff in secret, but she never told us what it was.
Okay.
Magic School was supposed to be a course where they revealed all the magic they do in the background. It was kind of ridiculous. I don't think, if she does do occult stuff, I think it's not what they taught in that class, but that was my last class I signed up for. And in that class in California, in front of a group of like 200 people, Nicole kind of gave me an ultimatum, like either you commit your life to us or you're out. And it wasn't an easy decision because if I'm honest, I probably would have stayed for another couple of years because I was having a lot of fun. But that's what made me leave ultimately.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And when you said before that you experienced burnout, how did that impact you sexually? Did you feel like you just didn't want to be physically involved with anybody when that happened? Did you just like need a break from all of the interactions with various people?
There were many times that I felt like I didn't want to. Yeah, I was just like tired of sexual stuff, yeah. I think most young men don't think that's possible, but like in OneTaste, it was just always there. And a lot of guys, I mean, this is, it's funny, but it was also like a lot of guys would kind of be running away from some of the expectations of sexuality in OneTaste at times.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And how did things work in terms of same-sex interactions and relationships?
There were a lot of lesbians in OneTaste. I mean, it's a very female-focused organization. Funny enough, a lot of lesbians became open to sex with men, maybe for the first time, or like a lot of women who had been maybe traumatized by men and were only lesbian at the time would start sleeping with men again at OneTaste. I don't really know why this happened, other than maybe they enjoyed being in a more traditional feminine role because of OneTaste, or like they met guys who were safe. I mean, that's like definitely a good part of OneTaste. gay guys didn't really have a place in OneTaste because, however, there was a period when I was in the coaching program where a lot of the men, not all the men, but a handful of men for the first time in their lives had more women in their life than they knew what to do with. And there was, obviously there's this ethic of sexual exploration and challenging your boundaries. So there was a period where a lot of guys were like, straight guys were really trying to almost like brag to each other as how far they would go with men, kind of like,
okay.
Yeah, because
Like,
it's like,
oh,
yeah,
I'm
was,
so
yeah.
sexually open, even though I'm
Yeah.
not gay, I'll sleep with you and you're another man. Kind of
like that. It was kind of like a way of showing how bold you were, yeah.
So you somewhat reluctantly decide that your journey with OneTaste has come to an end, and somehow you have a journey where you end up living in Thailand. So talk us through briefly how that journey went from A to B.
Yes. So I decided, so magic school was in September of 2014. I decided within the next month to leave OneTaste. I thought I was leaving on good graces. Like, I met with my mentor. I said a lot of loving things. Because I knew that when someone leaves OneTaste, they get ostracized. Like, that's just like what happens. And I didn't want that to happen to me. So I thought I could do something in a way that was like super peaceful and like, anyway, politically accepted in that world. But the same thing happened. I basically abruptly got excommunicated in a sense where, anyway, I got pushed out. Mm-hmm. So I had a really hard time readjusting into the world, because even though I was living in New York and every day I would interact with normal people, I was still in touch with my family and friends. I become so disconnected from like conventional culture. Like, I didn't know who the mayor of New York was, and I'd been living in New York the whole time. Like, I didn't know a lot of like political references. Like, I didn't know like most of the, I guess I'd been disconnected from that. And I had become so used to having like these deep, intense, vulnerable conversations with people all the time that I didn't, like, I couldn't really relate to normal people for a while.
Yeah, oh, nice weather we're having today. Then you're like, let me try and take this conversation a bit deeper than just talking about the weather.
It was hard to relate to people and like my old friends, and like I wanted to really hold on to the idea that I had been doing something really important and special for a few years, but no one cared and everyone thought it was weird. So, and like I found no one could really relate to the stress I was feeling from being cut off from this group, because I thought the group was crazy. So, and I was my only source of income at the time was working as a coach, which I started doing for OneTaste. But I had realized that I had taken on a lot of their what I think are unethical sales practices unintentionally. Like kind of creating dependence in my clients, like to like need to talk to me like an addict, as opposed to like really just being like a good therapist type of person. So I basically took a break and I spent a year driving Uber, doing catering jobs, like kind of just, and honestly being very depressed. I was like very depressed for a year ish. And then, at a certain point, I got back into coaching and realized that I really had gained a lot of wisdom and skills there. And before OneTaste, I was obsessed with personal development, so it didn't really change. And I created my own business. I teach classes and I coach people, and I use a lot of the skills I learned at OneTaste. And at some point, I moved to Thailand.
So even though there's been a period of declining or ill mental health from your experience involved with the group, you've gained some transferable skills which still positively impact your livelihood.
I mean, I learned a lot of things that people learn in personal development workshops, but it was 24/7. And I also think I got an education into human psychology that you can't learn in a workshop. Not to say it's the only place you could learn this, of course it's not, but like I learned about the Stanford prison experiment in psych classes in college, but I got to live it in OneTaste, and I got to be both sides, the prisoner, the prison guard, the
Yeah, yeah.
psychologist. Like, it was, yeah, it's just like a set of experiences. Like, and I, I don't know,
Mhm.
maybe this is again, maybe my spiritual ego, but I feel like I got a sense of understanding of how people work
Yeah.
that I couldn't have gotten anywhere else.
Yeah. I was actually thinking before when you were talking about not getting paid and being the only person that kind of had a problem with it, about the ash conformity experiment,
Mm-hmm,
where I've
mm-hmm.
spoken about this on the episode a few times, with like the different size sticks, and they ask
Yeah,
you to
yeah.
choose the biggest stick and everyone chooses the smallest one, and one guy's like, what, this is definitely not right, but I'll kind of agree with you all anyway. So that's what I was thinking when you were like, maybe it's me that's wrong if everybody else is saying that it's okay not to
Yeah.
get paid. So yeah, as you said, you've lived all these different psychology experiments, and you are still using some of the skills that you developed in OneTaste today. So you did mention briefly at the start of the episode that you're not sure if the organization is still ongoing, and my last questions were going to be, where are they now, and do you keep in touch with anybody that you knew when you were a part of the organization?
So in 2018, Bloomberg did an expose on them, and it was the first time they really got into the cult stuff. Like, other companies, other like online, other websites and stuff had covered OneTaste and been like, oh, they're kind of culty, they're kind of weird, but like no one really went in deep. And
Right.
Ellen Hewitt from Bloomberg did, and that led to an FBI investigation,
Wow.
and that did ultimately lead to OneTaste closing all of their physical centers. And obviously, that was a big part of their, everything was done in person.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, I don't know if all of this is accurate anymore, but the people who are really part of the cult part of OneTaste, like the following, they moved onto a land that Nicole got one of the OneTaste members to purchase. They call it the land, which was supposed to be a separate company than OneTaste, but they would still do orgasmic meditation. They're basically doing all the cult stuff
Under a
under a new
different
name.
name. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think they still have the land. I mean, I've heard different stories of what's going on. But last I heard, very recently, they've created a new company where they're basically giving spiritual advice to prisoners in California.
Okay.
And I don't know if this is I don't know exactly the motivation. I don't know if they're trying to actually recruit people or not, or if this, I do believe that Nicole and everyone in OneTaste does want to make the world a better place. So
Yeah.
maybe they're,
Yeah.
they're just trying to help prisoners,
Yeah.
but that's what they're doing last
I'm
time.
sure that there's also endorsements for like rehabilitation programs and pockets of funding available if you're willing to go and work with that particular community. So
It's
I wonder
possible.
if that has any influence over the decision to work with people in the prison system. It'd be interesting to know. But I guess the last thing to ask you before I ask if there's anything you think we've missed that should be included is, what advice would you give to people who are potentially trying to readjust back into some level of typical everyday life?
Well, I would tell them they're not crazy. That's probably what, and they didn't waste their life. No matter how long you spent in a cult or an alternate reality, believing things you no longer believe, it wasn't a waste if you don't make it a waste. Like, in my most depressed time in the year afterwards, I definitely thought I ruined my life. And that was the worst part. Obviously I didn't, but even, there's always something useful you can take from it. And I don't know if this is a helpful thought, but this is a thought that I like to think. It's like, everything is kind of a cult. Maybe it's not. I get a lot of like negative people don't like when I say this, but like everything's kind of a cult. Like some things are more persistent and more popular. And like, yeah, maybe you joined one that wasn't that great, but like everyone's kind of part of something and you're not, there's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah.
You were caught at a weird time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you said about thinking too much about the sunk cost fallacy is really important, around not putting too much pressure or blame on yourself, or thinking that you've wasted too much of your life or too much of your time, because as you said, you are no longer with OneTaste, but you've still gained a skill set that you use every day without the negative aspects of the organization, and you were able to identify what parts of that group were not kind and move away from those practices, but still keep the things that you'd learned during your time with OneTaste to positively impact other people that you work with outside of the OneTaste organization. So I think that in itself is a strong message to people who maybe feel like they were born into a certain, or people that were born into a certain group, or people who joined a certain group and feel as if they have wasted all of their time and have gained absolutely nothing back. Hopefully some people can look at the situation and pick out positive things that they can take with them through the rest of their journey without putting too much blame on themselves. So I think that is a really important message. So I pass it over to you now and ask you, Ruwan, if you think there's anything that you'd like to add that we haven't included today.
I don't think so. I think we covered quite a bit.
We definitely did. We definitely went through. I've got my little notebook here and it's looking nice and
yeah. No, I think we covered everything.
Fantastic. So I have written down a quote that you said earlier on in the episode, which will be used across my social media pages, that said they basically learned how to weaponize empathy, which I think is a perfect summary of what we've spoken about today. So thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to finally come and have this chat with me. I really do appreciate it. I know there's been a lot of changing dates and big life changes, but congratulations on the upcoming birth of your little baby.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And I hope that your move to Europe is nice and smooth. And I wish you the best of luck, and I'll be in touch with you when our episode goes live.
Great. Sounds great.
Thank you so much, Ruwan, for your time. Take care.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
That is the end of this week's episode. If you'd like to get in touch, you can do so by emailing me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com or follow me on Twitter and Instagram at cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker, Casey, and this has been the Cult Vault.